This is Sanjay Shrivastava. Thanks for joining us for the webinar. And with me also, I have David Lane, who is a Vice President of Business Development. And as you guys might have seen our sort of promotions that we do this about once a month, these webinars on different topics. So today we're going to talk about our cloud computing labs. So I'll go ahead with the 15-minute overview introduction of Vocarium. So just give you a general overview of all of our labs for those of you who might not be familiar with it. Then for the next 30 minutes, we would have a demo. And David will go ahead and specifically focus on our cloud labs. And then after that, we'll open it up for Q&A, as well as we'll announce our winners. So we'll have a drawing of everyone who's attending, and to show our appreciation for you taking in a time of a busy day, we'll announce a winner and we'll send you a gift basket with hopefully some useful stuff. You can ask questions at any time using the Q&A function of Zoom, and one of us will try to address the questions right away. So with that, let me just start with a little bit introduction about what Vocarium is about. So we provide virtual labs, and what we mean by virtual labs, that these are spaces which bring data, compute, and guardrails together. And what we mean by guardrails is just to make sure that as an administrator, or the teacher, as an author, you can specify some guardrails around in terms of the budget or time and how much memory or compute that the user can use in a specific lab. And then we will, when the learner comes to the platform, we'll focus on making sure that the labs are provisioned. We'll auto scale our infrastructure if it's needed, and when the learner goes away, then we'll terminate the labs. There's always data persistence solution in on of our labs, which means that when the learner comes back to the lab, they don't lose their data. We will also have different roles on Vocarium. So there are some built-in roles like admin and teacher and learner and graders. But now we have you can actually even build your custom roles for the platform. So we're getting more and more requests, for example, for an undergrad TA role. So someone who can just come in and just give feedback to the learner, but not being able to actually set the grades. We have different identity solutions. So you can authenticate the user either through Vocarium or through LTI or SAML, or even through our APIs. So hopefully all this together will build a very highly scalable enterprise grade and secure infrastructure for the labs. What's unique about Vocarium? So while in the market, you can find a lot of labs, for example, for a VDI solution or maybe a coding solution, but in Vocarium, we do have a broadest categories of compute, different virtualization levels to suit the need. Hopefully it will become clear as we talk specifically about the labs. Our labs are designed to be integrated tightly with different learning experience. So we understood from day one that the labs do not stand on their own. They need to be part of the learning journey, which means they need to be integrated into the learning environment, maybe, and the assessment environment. And our labs are we'll provide you with network level isolation for compliance. So for example, if you're a company and if you want to bring some proprietary data, or maybe even some licensed servers, if you're a company, maybe you have a commercial license server you want to bring in, you can completely isolate the labs for your organization. And the labs come with rich assessment suite. So that's again a very, very key functionality of our labs, and we'll talk a little bit more about it and hopefully be a part of the demo. Flexible deployment. So there are different contexts in which these labs are deployed, and you can either use one of our managed applications, for example, Jupyter Notebooks or RStudio or some cybersecurity labs, or if that's not enough for your need, you can actually bring your own Docker image or your own AMIs, and we will manage the deployment as a part of our platform. As I was saying that we have the broadest suite of fully managed labs. The top 3 labs are actually the most sort of the important labs right now. They're the highly used labs in our platform. The data science lab. When we say data science labs, which we mean that these labs will bring in data and compute together and you can in a very flexible environment. Cloud computing has by far the largest number of learners at any given point of time. They're learning AWS and now Azure. And then cybersecurity labs, which these are the personal cyber ranges that we can build for a learner. These are becoming more and more popular. We also support big data labs, which essentially means that you can launch a Spark clusters and the learners can submit their jobs on these clusters. Machine learning labs, these are specifically for the case when you want to provide maybe a GPU with a different machine learning framework. Kubernetes deployment, this is a few of our customers are teaching Kubernetes deployment as a part of our platform. So what essentially it means that we will launch a network of 3 nodes, 1 parent and 2 worker nodes, and these are part of a network, so they can be used to configure a Kubernetes cluster. Programming labs, as you can imagine, these are pretty popular as well. Lots and lots of different languages, Python, Java, C++, Go, Scala, they are being sort of, and just about, a lot of other languages that are being used. People are learning on our platform, and which, of course, different languages also mean different IDEs. So, for example, for Java, your learner might want to use IntelliJ, but maybe for Python, they might want to use VS Code. So we support that as a part of a platform. Full stack, this is another one, maybe full stack or a CI/CD is something which is probably very popular on the platform. So what specifically it means is that you can build maybe a server, you can launch the server on one of our Docker containers, and then the learner can launch a browser to go and interact with the application that they just launched. Database, so we have 4 databases that is built into the platforms: MySQL, Postgres, Neo4j, and DynamoDB. So with the click of a button, you can give every user their own personal database server, which you can initialize. So cloud computing, I would not go into more detail because there'll be a lot more detail about it, hopefully as a part of the demo. But as I was saying, this one, especially for AWS Cloud, we have the largest number of learner at any given point of time. So learning cloud computing. So we have at any given somewhere between 1 to 2 million learners, which are actively engaged in one of the actively engaged in a course in Vocarium. I would say more than half of them are learning cloud computing. But the details about how the cloud is set up, I will just skip that so that leave it for the demo. Data science lab, what it means is that a lot of times the Jupyter notebooks, sometimes RStudio, but you can configure the lab to say, okay, I want a learner to get access to a Jupyter notebook, but also provide them a data. And by data, you can provide them the data different ways. You can give them access to a database, as I was mentioning earlier on. You can upload a large data set. It can be as much as tens of gigabytes, or you can deliver data through some object store like, say, AWS S3. So you can give learners a credential to that, a read-only credential to that. Compute, they can run the job either right there in their Docker container or their virtual machines, or they can launch the job into, say, a Spark cluster on a cloud service. And hopefully you will, again, at least the cloud service I know is a part of the demo. So hopefully you'll get a little bit more in-depth view of it. Again, data science lab, they have some built-in unique assessment capabilities. For example, NB Grader, if you're familiar with it, then this is from Berkeley. This is a very, very popular framework for assessment of Python notebooks. You can provide inline comments for a Jupyter notebook. already sort of mentioned that it comes integrated with the data source. You can have different data source which you can provide to the learner, and for assessment you can use a different data set if you want. Um, we talked about delivering the managed Spark cluster and managed cloud credentials, and then we are continuing to build more and more robust roadmap, and specifically when we say from a roadmap perspective, on one side we are doing integration with more data warehouses, the proprietary data sources. On the other hand, integration with analytics tool. So as I was mentioning earlier on, that to be able to deliver a broad set of labs, one virtualization architecture cannot serve it all. So we have different, different sort of virtualization that we deliver. So some of them are managed applications like Jupyter Notebook or VS Code, which we are built in as a part of the platform, and also cloud labs where we will deliver credentials. Or you can build a network of containers. So this is, and this could be completely custom. So you can bring your own Docker image, or you can build a custom network of virtual machines. So for example, if you're building a cybersecurity cyber range for the learner, it might have a network of some Windows and some Linux machines, and then you can network them together. And you can provide it in a single or multi-tenant infrastructure. And what we mean by that Vocarium, we have some applications like Jupyter that we run on our multi-tenant infrastructure, which will auto scale. But for compliance reasons, or maybe if you want to bring in some special license server, or maybe your own AMI, then you can deliver. We will manage a single tenant infrastructure for you. So this is just with a click of a button. We'll set up a infrastructure, and we will actually give access to. We'll worry about all the security and provisioning and scaling of the resources in that infrastructure. So once again, in single tenant infrastructure, it can be multi-region data center for a commercial tools. You can bring your AMI. You can build a Docker cluster from your image. You can launch HPC, for example, in your own, and you can decide what instance type you want to deliver to the learner. So this could be a part of your cost management strategy. So Vocarium has been deployed in lots of different use cases. The initial one was the assignment and projects in universities. So and these are used for either for students to work on their own, or in a class. It is being used more and more when the class with the instructor will ask everyone to sort of open their Vocarium lab and they'll work through it. Exams, especially during COVID, this became a bigger and bigger use case for us, and we have a lot of functionality just focused around exams. Boot camps is becoming more and more interesting use case. It is like when we say boot camps, in this specific case, what we mean by that is there's an instructor there, and maybe virtually there are a few learners. So we're implementing more and more features to how do you make it more efficient. What if one specific learner is stuck with some installations or a problem? So how can the instructor go and help them? Enterprise sandbox. So we are beginning to hear more and more from enterprises where that they would like to provide a sandbox, often say a cloud computing sandbox for the learners. So these are not structured in the sense that they are not part of some formal lesson, but these are sandboxes where the admin can control things like how much you spend, what kind of resources you can launch, but otherwise the learner can do, user can do whatever they want. Publishing, so this is another big deal where unlike some other cases, the content authoring is done at one place and then distributed to lots of different learners and different business models. So we support that. And workshop and hackathons. So this is another use case where in a workshop, you might have hundreds or thousands of learners to come together and they follow along. So these are some of the use cases where the labs are being deployed right now. We are integrated to all the learning platforms like Coursera, edX, Emeritus, Simplilearn, Udemy, Udacity. We have been deployed in about 1,000 universities worldwide. Assessment, so these are some of the, again, we will not get into more detail because of the time, but here are some of the assessment capabilities that built into the platform. There's an auto grading, manual grading, built-in plagiarism detection. You can give inline comment, do some peer reviews, leaderboard, this is for some gamification, and multiple choice. Believe it or not, multiple choice was the last assessment strategy that we integrated for, for cases where you might want to ask the learner to start a lab on the left-hand side and then maybe answer some multiple choice question on the right panel. Supporting exams, as I mentioned, there are a lot of features very specific to exams. And if you have interest in it, please please go ahead and contact us, and we can go over in more detail. So learning management tools, as I mentioned, that we do integrate them through LTI. This is again both LTI 1.1 and 1.3. This has been a very, very big sort of use case, and which means that the course material, the enrollment, and grading can be automatically synced with your LMS, and the learner does not have to create an account on Vocarium. That's automatically created. The REST API, we have a rich suite of REST APIs. So some of the use cases are that maybe the authors want to maintain their content in a Git repo, then they will use it to update their Vocarium content via REST API. Or maybe you have your own learning application and you want to maybe iframe the Vocarium ID in the middle of it. So those are kind of the two big use cases. And the third one is analytics. So we provide a lot of data. We used our API to maybe get maybe process the data in your own warehouse. At this point, I would like to hand it to David for the demo.
As Sanjay mentioned, I'm David Lin with Vocarium. I'm here to provide a survey of a few of the cloud infrastructure labs that Vocarium offers. These are essentially, as Sanjay was mentioning, hands-on skills training environments, which can start as essentially a empty sandbox or preloaded with some content and then protected by policy and budgets. In previous demos, we have shown the integration of Vocarium labs into learning management systems like through LTI, like Canvas or edX, Coursera, Brightspace, D2L. So today we're just going to demonstrate the labs in a standalone Vocarium environment. First, we'll go through the learner experience, and so this is the learner experience on in this tab. And after that, in this other tab, we have the instructor experience, and we can show you how we can actually configure the labs and the courses. Okay, so let's start with the left-hand side here. This is a course, again, in as a learner, and I'm presented with 6 different labs here. So I'm over here logged in as a student in the Vocarium portal. On the next tab over here, I have logged in as an instructor, right? And so this is how we will configure a lab. And so first I'll show the student experience. And what you'll see is we've got a series of 6 different labs as part of this, this course. And the first lab is an AWS sandbox. And it's a very, very simple lab, which basically has maybe some instructional material that that you would like to present to the learner. And then there's also a start button. We've got, kind of the budgets. So here we've got $100 budgets of cloud budget. I've only used 0, and I've got a timer here. Okay, and this is a button to launch into an AWS console. So when I click this button, I'll get SSO'd straight into an AWS. No need for a username, password, cutting and pasting, all that stuff. That's all. We'll send a user straight into an AWS console. We're actually managing upwards of 3 million AWS accounts, and so each learner will have access to their own AWS account with certain privileges. Okay, and so that is configurable by the instructor, or it could be using Vocarium's sort of base sandbox policies. Okay, and then there's also the budget, which the instructor can set aside for the learners. And one of the biggest problems that we've heard in the past is that when learners are trying to experiment with AWS or some other cloud services, you know, if they have to sign up for their own accounts, it becomes a barrier. And then also one of the biggest issues is once they're in their own account and they're running these labs, oftentimes they may make mistakes, or they may leave a lab running for a long time, and so that causes a lot of stress, because, you know, at the end of the day, if they sign in for their own account on AWS, then they're putting their credit cards in, and so there's a lot of risk there for the learners, and that's a big impediment to starting. And so with Vocarium, you can get them a sandbox environment, an AWS environment that is guardrailed, right? Both in terms of policy and budget. In this case, we are blocking DynamoDB, for example, but all the other resources are available. So for example, I can go into EC2, I can launch an EC2 instance, and then this policy here is also blocking certain EC2 sizes, for example. And then we also have concurrency checks to prevent launching of too many instances at the same time. Okay, and so this is just an example of a sandbox environment with no specific sort of instructions to the learners. Okay, I'm going to go into another lab here, and this is one to evaluate an AWS environment. Okay, and so this is a lab in which we're asking the students to do certain things and answer some questions. Okay, and so on the left-hand side, we're actually launching an AWS environment. This is a separate AWS environment from the previous one, and we're loading it inside this window over here. And this is a lab that has been preloaded also with certain resources. Okay, and so if we go in and take a peek around, you'll see that we have loaded an EC2 instance. Okay, and so this is actually a read-only lab, and so we've preloaded some resources in here, and we've got some instances here, and so we can go on the right-hand side. You know, the questions are to go and inspect this environment. You know, asking you what type of instance was web server 1, and we can take a look and inspect it and say, okay, this is a T2 micro, you can see over here. So we can answer the question here: what operating system is this web server? And we can go and see that's a Linux operating system, right? And from here we can then go and, you know, of course, answer all the other questions, do a submission. Okay, and so what will happen is we are recording the submission, sending it to our grading server, and then coming back with grades. So we gave you know, full marks for the first 2 questions. We didn't answer the third and fourth questions, so we got zeros for that. Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea of what we can do here, which is we have preloaded content into a lab environment, given the learner access to that lab environment. The learner has, you know, is again guardrailed by whatever policies you put in. In this case, all they could do is inspect the environment. They can't launch any resources. Okay, so you can keep the cost down. And again, this is a different AWS account. So this is 9870 whatnot from this other account that we had launched previously, and this one is 1510, for example. Okay, and so we are able to provision multiple accounts per learner, and we can get them, access again, fully protected. This is another example of a very similar lab, and this is evaluating Azure environment. Okay, and so again, on the left-hand side, we are launching an Azure. Give it a second. We're launching an Azure console here, and we're also evaluating the cloud computing environment on the right-hand side. Okay, and so give it a second, and so we are automatically logging you straight into Azure through this window. And again, you have the same sort of restrictions that we place on an AWS account. In this case, we can actually provide multiple types of Azure accounts. So we can deliver learner accounts at the resource group level, as well as the subscription level, and then also with access to Active Directory. Okay, and so beyond that, there's lots of controls with regards to policy, budget, and then this again can be, as Sanjay was mentioning, embedded into other learning management systems, right? So right now we are running this standalone, right? But if you wanted to, we can send this Azure environment and credentials to another environment. And again, this is some multiple choice questions that we can ask the students to answer. So the previous two labs kind of ask a student to evaluate a read-only environment. The next couple labs are really hands-on and building an environment. Okay, and so this next one here is the challenge lab. Okay, and so it's got some minimal instructions on the right-hand side, asking the learner to set up a static website on AWS using an AWS console or using the AWS CLI. Okay, and so if we start the lab, we're picking up a credential, and then on the left-hand side we have a terminal that we can use to access access the AWS AWS account that I have. So scribe instances. Oops, did not spell that correct. So here I don't have any instances launched, for example, and part of this assignment or exercise is to create an S3 bucket, for example, and I can also do S3 calls. I can do it straight through the CLI if I'd like, or I can launch into an AWS account. Okay, so if I click this, I'll be launching an AWS account in a new tab. So let me log out of this one, which is the previous lab first. Okay, and now when I click this, I will launch straight into the new AWS account. Okay, and so this one is 0187, which is a third AWS account that I have access to as a learner. And from here, I can go to S3. I can go and populate the S3 with some contents and set up the bucket. We'll name it my web and so on, right? And so there's and once we're done with this, rather than just answering multiple choice questions, when I do a submission, we are actually running a script, and this script will go and inspect the learner's environment. Okay, and so it will itself make AWS calls and see whether or not we have performed those three tasks. And so, we did not create an S3 bucket. We did not create an S3 bucket website, right? And so, the tasks are to create this bucket, make it read-only or readable by the public, and then upload a file, right? And so we didn't do any of that, so we got zeros. Okay. So this next lab is actually, again, using another AWS account, Okay, and but this time we're using a different front end. Okay, and so what we're doing here is we have launched a Jupyter notebook, okay, as the front end here, and we started an AWS lab, and so we've now got AWS credentials, and I can actually run code that uses these credentials, right? So I'm going to, so this is the next cell is Boto 3. So I will go and run Boto 3 and connect a comprehend client. Okay, and then I will analyze a sample tweet. Okay, and so I just ran some comprehend, detect key phrases, and detect entities sort of functions to understand what this tweet what it means, right? Or to kind of parse it out. And then the instruction here is to write code to evaluate the sentiment of this sample tweet. And so so I've commented out the correct answer. So I will uncomment it. And we will run the cell. And then we're supposed to, and so there's a cell here which will actually grade the student work. And so when we do a submission, then again, it will send the student submission to the grading server. The grading server will go and run the student code and then evaluate this auto-graded cell. And this is using, as Sanjay was mentioning, the MB grader capability. And so we got 10 out of 10. Right, if we recommented this out, let's save it and do a submission. Right, so we will have failed this this exercise. So I got zeros now. Okay, and so this kind of gives you an idea of, okay, you can use any sort of front end. There could be some scripts in the background, or we can use a grading sort of library to evaluate. The grading library has access to the student's AWS account, and there's and each of the students' AWS accounts are protected appropriately. Okay, and this last one is a hackathon. So we did a hackathon with AWS a couple of years back. This is just a demo of what you can set up, right? And so here, this is kind of like that sandbox, but they have prettified it, right? And you can set it up in with all sorts of HTML if you'd like. We can start the lab, and it will actually preload the lab with COVID-19 data lake. And so once the hackathon gets started, they can go and leverage some of the data that's inside the data lake and build their projects. So that was pretty cool. Okay, this is the student experience, and I want to also now take you to the instructor experience on setting up these labs. Okay, and so here's the instructor side. You'll see that we have a series of labs organized under the December demo. Of course, we're in March now. Time really flies. We also have a bunch of old labs that we had set up before, and I've kind of archived that in this old area. Okay, and so inside this folder, we have this AWS Sandbox lab, and a lab can consist of one or more parts, and this one only has one. And so here we specify what the IDE type is. So right now we're using a very, very simple Vocarium Elite IDE. So if you recall, this is very, very, kind of a trivial environment where we just basically have, have some some simple README file here. Okay, and so we'll use a Vocarium Elite. We'll also tie a resource, Cloud Labs, and we can select Azure or AWS. Okay, and if we wanted to, we could tie in a database. So here we can, tie in MongoDB database. We can tie in MySQL databases. We'll launch these databases and make those available to the environment as well. We can also launch Spark clusters and whatnot. Down here, we have the budgets and times, so we can actually set up the session length. Right here, we're setting up a 5-hour session. If it's a trivial lab, we can say, give the students 15 minutes, let's say, or 30 minutes. Right here, we also say end lab behavior. Okay, so at the end of that session, what happens? Or with the student clicks end lab, what happens? We'll actually stop the resources, or we can terminate resources. Okay, for the most part, we recommend that that you use terminate resources because if it's a guided exercise, at the end of it, we want everything to be cleaned up. When they come back again, they'll come back to a clean slate. If it's like a sandbox where you're incrementally building out some infrastructure, then stopping the resources would make sense, right? We don't actually provide a scenario where you can leave the resources running because, of course, that will rack up the cost in the labs. After a lab start, we can, if it's a stop, we can also dictate when the resources are actually terminated, right? So we won't leave resources lying around indefinitely. And then we also have a cost budget, right? So we can say, okay, this lab has a $100 budget, but we can also specify that, you have a $100 budget, but you can only spend $10 a month. Okay, and then we can also, specify the total time budget. You can only spend, 12,000 minutes total for this lab, right? And so we can specify those as well. And then on the lab interface side, we can specify, what information to provide to the learner, whether, show the timer, turn on and off the budgets, details, that sort of thing. Okay, and then we can go over and take a look at the policies. And so this is here, we have a lab.policy, which specifies what the learner can do, okay, inside this lab. And so here we can say they can do pretty much anything, okay. But if we take a look at some of our other labs, we can say, they can't do certain activities. Here we're saying, okay, we're going to deny access to, DynamoDB reserved instances. We're denying access to fleets. We're denying access to certain instance types, right? So we're saying, okay, you can launch at largest a medium-sized instance, like a T2 medium, for example, right? If I switch over to this evaluate AWS environment lab, you'll see there's a little bit more information here. So this is a lab that gets submitted, right? And so now there's concept of grades. We can also set up team projects such that multiple learners can join the same lab and work on the project together. We can turn on an exam mode, right? So let's say you wanted this lab itself to be an exam, and once we can unpublish it and we turn on this exam mode. Let's do that. Okay. So if we turn on the exam mode, then we can actually specify information about this exam, whether you want it to be a timed exam, a manually scheduled exam, timed and unrestricted, that sort of thing, right? And so basically what that means is if it's a timed exam, for example, we can say, okay, once you enter, you have 30 minutes to complete this lab or complete this exam, and you have one submission attempt, okay? Or we can say, okay, once you enter, then you have 120 minutes or whatnot. So you can specify that if it's scheduled, then it all depends on the publication dates and times. Okay. If you remember this lab, we actually launched the EC2 instance in directly as well, right? So we have policies, right? But we also have what we call lab.template. And so this is a CloudFormation template that you can preload. You can load into the teacher environment, and whenever a learner comes in, they will automatically have this CloudFormation launch into their account for them. Okay, and so in this case, we've created some VPCs, some subnets, and then we also launched a web instance, a T2 Micro web instance here. Okay, and so in this case, we had this environment again. Let's take a quick peek at it. Oops, I unpublished it, but we'll use this as a proxy here. All right, so this is an Azure lab. So again, we had content on the left, and then we had some Q&A on the right. Okay, and so how we set up the Q&A on the right is pretty straightforward as well. So this is again into the teacher environment, and we have a simple markdown and a markdown format that you can use to specify the questions and answers, right? And so basically this is an extended markdown. We're asking the question here. We're saying that these are single select boxes, and then we're also indicating the correct answer. Okay, and so this is a multi-select here, saying which outbound ports are available for this EC2. Okay, and once we're done with that, we can generate the quiz. Okay, so what that does is it will process this, remove the answers, and then present this the markdown and convert it to an HTML. Okay, and so if we take a look at this, this is the HTML that gets generated, and this is the quiz that was presented to the learners in that other view. Okay, and so that kind of walks you through, the setup for a cloud account that has a policy. It's got CloudFormation template. It also has a multiple choice question and answer, right? And then this last one here, at least this one here, we're actually running a script, if you recall. Okay, and so if we go over to the scripts directory inside the teacher IDE, you'll see a submit.sh. And here we're actually using AWS CLI calls to query the S3 environment, looking for this MyWeb bucket. Okay, and then we're also looking to see whether or not the bucket is visible, and then we will, kind of send the grades to a grade file, which then gets presented to the learner. So this script gets executed when the learner clicks the submit button. Okay, and so that's kind of the setup of the assignments or the labs. And then as a instructor, of course, we can go back and see how the learners have done, right? And so we can look at the submissions for this challenge lab, for example. And you'll see that I've submitted it, I got zeros, and David Demo submitted as well, got zeros. Right? We can switch to different labs that we had, and then here's the Jupyter example, and so we see that David submitted, got 10, and this is David Demo was this account which got zeros, right? And if we wanted to, we can drop into the submission and see that they did 14 submissions, and and it got 10s. And then if we wanted to, we can go and, we can go in here and provide some comments, for example, on their code, right? Good job. Save the comment. I can even go and provide some comments here, and also update their score if I wanted to, right? And so this kind of gives you the idea of how we can go and walk through the different learners in my course and update the grades as well. And then if we wanted to, this is probably the last thing I'll show here for today, is I can go visit a student environment, right? And so I can say, okay, I want to go to David at Vocarium, and I can see their lab environment. I can see the activity that they've done. I can see the cost table to see how much they've actually incurred and spend. Okay, so they didn't spend that much here. Right, I can go look at the logs and see, anytime they entered the lab, whenever they click the start lab button and all that stuff, right? So there's a lot of information there that you can glean from it. And then finally, we provide some analytics for the lab cost, for example. How much each student spent on each lab, right? We can also look at the lab time and see how much time students have spent in the labs.